Good afternoon and welcome. I hope that you're all well as we're coming up to this 18th Sunday of Ordinary Time. August. Can you really believe it? Bob Dylan's song, "The Times They Are A-Changing," seems somehow applicable to where we find ourselves in these days of coronavirus and wondering whether church will ever be the same again. So here's a thought. Sometimes when the normal, the routine, the familiar somehow break down or are disrupted, it is then that we often find God. God can somehow get our attention, and we're able to spend some time to think. Life is so hectic these days that we don't have time to think. But during lockdown, we should at least have an hour a week spare to think. To think through what we really believe and what is really important. As we read through the first reading for this Sunday, and if we're honest, we don't really have an excuse for not reading it, because even if we don't have a missal, the readings are on the website and Pauline emails them out. So as we read from Isaiah, we have to admit that when it comes down to it, so often we do waste time and money and effort on things that are not really that important. Especially when we consider the bigger questions of life, like death and eternity. Okay, you don't want to think about death, but it's actually not optional. So it is as we ponder these things that we hear that little voice of the Lord saying, "Pay attention. Come to me. Listen. And your soul shall live." Surely what we're learning through this time of lockdown, when we don't have church as we know it, and we don't have Eucharist and communion, what we are learning is that we do have God. And as Paul tells the Romans, nothing can come between us and the love of Christ. All these things are transient. But God doesn't change. He is eternal, and his love for us doesn't change. But there's more. Jesus doesn't want us to just be receivers. He calls us to be his disciples, who will learn how to meet the needs of others, both physical and spiritual. As we read this famous parable of the feeding of the 5,000, I think it has more to do with challenging the disciples than it does to feeding people. After all, the people expected miracles. That's why they trekked off to this lonely place to find Jesus. But the disciples, imagine the challenge when Jesus turns to them and says, "You give them something to eat." The disciples learned that day that when they surrendered their inadequate supply to Jesus, And he blessed the Father, and he broke the bread. Everyone was fed, including the disciples. This was Eucharist. Well, that has to be enough to think about for now. So, read the scriptures. And may God bless you and your families, and may you know the joy of the Lord, whatever might change. And this weekend, we have a special blessing for John and for Marilyn from Llangefni, who are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. May God bless you, and you are in our prayers.